So over the last 3 months, I have been covering formerly liberal or leftist comedians who have seemingly all started pandering to a right-wing audience. Now, last Friday, I made a video about Joe Rogan, which you guys seem to like, but some of you are my new subscribers, so a lot of you would have seen the Bill Maher video. Not so many of you probably saw the Russell Brand 2-part series I did. But basically, from making all these videos, I've got myself wondering, why do these people, for some reason or another, abandon more left-leaning politics in favour of more reactionary right-wing politics? It's probably not a coincidence. All three of these people I'm going to be talking about today, Russell Brand, Bill Maher, and Joe Rogan, are all so-called comedians. Russell Brand's the only one who's made me laugh, but they're also all conspiracy theorists, and Russell Brand is the outlier in that Joe Rogan and Bill Maher specifically are anti-woke as well, where Russell Brand is not anti-woke, but he is playing heavily into right-wing framing of issues. So in this video today, I thought it'd be fun if we took a look at all three of these figures. I am going to play a couple clips from my previous videos, but to make it less repetitive, I have sought out new clips that I've never featured in my videos to keep it a bit more fresh. If you have watched all the videos I've mentioned, you won't just be watching the same thing all over again. So to start with, we're going to look at r/conservatives, the subreddit, as a good litmus test for how conservatives in America now view these three people. Then we're going to probably start with Bill Maher, go on to Russell Brand, and finish with Joe Rogan, and just analyse why each one has seemingly changed their politics or start pandering to a right-wing audience. But before we go any further, please like the video, and I guess for today's question, who is the worst out of these three? And I guess the criteria could be influence or their actual politics, who has the worst politics here. I would say that Russell Brand is probably the least bad out of all of them. I'd say it's really a toss-up between Bill Maher and Joe Rogan, but honestly, I don't see too much redeeming things about Bill Maher at all, so I'm tempted to say he's the worst out of all of these, but then I would say Joe Rogan has the biggest influence, and he's irresponsibly platformed and agree with a lot of people who are worse than all of these guys. So I don't know, it's a toss-up to me between Bill Maher and Joe Rogan, but let me know in the comments who is the worst out of these three. And probably a bonus point for Russell that he has made me laugh at least once. Also, follow me on social media at the Kavernacle on Twitter, on Instagram. Check out our subreddit down in the description. Also, for every 5k, we get a new chocolate orange. I'm really sorry I haven't bought the new one yet. Next week, definitely, I will have this new one. But help me keep chugging along and get to 80k so we can have another chocolate orange. Also, consider supporting me on Patreon. I want to build up as many $1 to $3 patrons as possible, and the benefits of that, I'll get my Nintendo Switch friend code and access to the private patrons Discord server. Also, subscribe to my second channel, the Kavernacle Extra, to see my archive live streams. So in yesterday's video, we talked about Ricky Gervais, and the whole premise was how Ricky Gervais, despite not being very conservative in his politics, has really garnered a conservative audience for his anti-woke stand-up routines or just the things he says on Twitter. And I feel these three are kind of an extension of that, although I would say that Bill Maher and Joe Rogan have more conservative politics than Ricky Gervais. So like I said earlier, a good litmus test is to go on r/conservative, which is dominated by American conservatives, and see how they feel about supposed liberals and leftists, Russell Brand, Joe Rogan, and Bill Maher. So if you just go on the conservative subreddit and in the search bar type in any of these three names, you will get a load of posts which cite conservative news outlets promoting these people. So 68 days ago, after Russell Brand is attacked by big media, Elon Musk and Jordan Peterson defend the comedian. That has 1,400 upvotes. But here's more comments. It's been surreal watching the moderate leftists wake up and then watching their leftist bases turn on them. I do find it funny that these guys think Russell Brand was a moderate leftist. He really was not, especially maybe 6 or 7 years ago, a moderate leftist at all. He was a proper leftist. These guys would not agree with anything he said. If anyone reading this hasn't subscribed to Russell on YouTube, I strongly recommend it. At the very least, you should always listen to the first minute of each episode. If you're in a bad mood, it will instantly pull you out of it. Russell Brand is interesting, looks like a total hippie or mimbo, but in reality, he's really smart and sees through a lot of the BS happening right now. He has a lot of sensible takes and is able to articulate them well. His stuff is good. I never thought Russell was all that funny, found his personality annoying, and he talks so fast. I had zero hope for his channel at the first I watched it, and just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, he totally redeemed himself. Honestly, his channel is the only news channel I subscribe to. The actual stories he talks about isn't the most important part of the show. The most important part is how he breaks it down. I've learned so much about keeping an open mind, recognizing propaganda, and I'm proud to consider myself one of his 5 million shimmering wonders. I would recommend everyone who's a conservative fan of Russell Brand sort by oldest video and watch a couple from 2014, which I'll probably show you some clips from in this video. So comedian Russell Brand, Trump was right about Hillary and Russia, 1,794 upvotes. While I disagree with him in many positions, I can truly appreciate how open he is about rational positions of difference. Good guy and entertaining to listen to. I started watching Brand's podcast a few months ago. I don't agree with a lot of his views, however, he's one of the few far left personalities that will actually have a constructive conversation with conservative personalities. He also doesn't turn a blind eye towards what happens in today's society because it's convenient and safe. He's willing to call it out. So another one, 3,000 upvotes, Russell Brand. Big tech media ignored Hunter Biden's story because they didn't want to influence the election. Russell Brand is one of the most interesting celebrities. I used to despise him. He was the poster child for so many of society's problems. I don't know what's changed, but now he's super chilled, thoughtful, peaceful, clean person and comes across very sincere. I respect the hell out of him. So we're going to get on to Russell Brand, but he's complained that people call him right-wing. But if so many conservatives, like far-right American conservatives, are saying that you're worth listening to and you're rational, you really are not saying anything that goes against their own narratives. And you can see from Russell Brand's channel, which I pointed out in my videos on him, he literally is just pandering to conservatives to get his views and subscribers. And while I don't think he's a grifter for money, I do think he's a grifter for ego, and I think he wants to be really, really popular. So they also upvote loads of stuff about Bill Maher, 900 upvotes. Bill Maher calls Elizabeth Warren's student loan forgiveness a loser issue. When something is too liberal for Bill Maher, it should be common sense it's too liberal for the rest of the country. I mean, Bill Maher is pretty much a conservative at this point, but this makes me laugh. Another one, Progressive Blast Bill Maher, and I'm going to talk about this clip where he talks about basically people identifying as LGBTQ because it's trendy, essentially. He is speaking the truth. He was always anti-woke, but I think he's going to go right-wing soon. Bill Maher condemns protests outside Supreme Court justices' homes, calls out the White House it's wrong. I like Bill for his consistent objectivity. He has some unique perspectives on hotline issues and stays true to his beliefs. I do think he has a bad case of Trump derangement syndrome that he can't seem to shake, but I commend him for calling out the left for their nonsense while also holding the right accountable for their mistakes. He's not perfect, but he's definitely one of the more tolerable left-leaning entertainers. My views haven't changed, the Democratic Party has changed. He was just what liberals were before the crazies took over the party. Dude really has not changed much. The crazies will attempt to cancel him at some point. So just loads and loads of posts all about Bill Maher. Same with Joe Rogan as well. Like, you see so many posts where he is heavily upvoted because these people have all been like these new heroes for the right. Funny thing is that Rogan is definitely left-leaning, a real liberal, including morals, ethics, and logic, not the monstrosity of the now Democratic Party that the far left has turned it into, which isn't classical liberalism in the slightest. I do love how all these people are so right-wing, they think the Democratic Party under Joe Biden has gone far left just because there exists a small contingent of more left-leaning politicians in the Democratic Party, like the Squad. It means the whole Democratic Party's gone crazy when in essence they're run by like an old school Republican in Joe Biden. But you can see there why they like people like Brand, Rogan, and Maher. It's because they call out the wokeness. They agree with the right's framing on LGBT rights. They call out medical science. They basically agree with conservatives on a lot of issues. They're just not personally as hateful as them. So I guess we'll start with Russell Brand, I think, because it's been the longest time since I have actually covered Russell Brand. Russell Brand used to be like really, really left-leaning and like a proper leftist, and I think he still is like anti-capitalist, but like I said, him buying into right-wing framings of issues has meant that he has got this new right-wing fan base. But Russell Brand's channel did start off as something that was quite funny. He talked a lot about like anti-capitalism, anti-monarchism, loads of things that I would agree with.
I mean, that is mad, isn't it? That shouldn't be happening anymore. We're a sophisticated species now. We've evolved beyond that. We don't need people in great big gold houses covered in medals for stuff they can't possibly have done. I mean, what would warrant that? If it was like if this was a film and he was some sort of space admiral You'd think, oh, he must have killed an alien nation or something like that. Han Solo at the end of Star Wars don't get that, did he? They just go, I appreciate what you've done with blowing up the Death Star. Look at him! I don't think there's no point in having a royal family no more, do you? Should just get shot of them. I think so.
He was also an extremely strong supporter of Palestine against Israel. And I just want to start showing you how he's changed. Here is him talking last year about Israel-Palestine. Now, if you watch my videos about Russell Brand, you'll see me break this down in greater detail. But basically, he was a very strong supporter, sympathised loads with them, but in 2021, he seemed to have changed.
I feel like it's such a complex and challenging problem, such a challenging issue, that by getting into it, when people ask you even to do a video, what they're really saying is, come out on my side, speak on my behalf. And I feel like, as a person over here in England, and the role of the country I'm from in creating this situation historically is a sort of an important and an unhealthy and pretty tainted one, I feel like I don't have anything particularly positive to offer. Because I feel like I know people across the spectrum of opinions with regard to this issue, I feel like just sad about it. How can any situation be resolved unless the people that are entrenched on either side are willing to change? And of course, even if you say something like that, people on both sides are, well, we've tried to change, we offered this deal. Yeah, well, we tried to change, we offered this deal. You know, it makes me feel like, what can you do? What can you say? Whose hands are clean? Who in the world is free to comment on an issue like this? And if I think, really, when you're saying do a video, you're saying take a side, then I think you're part of the problem. You're part of the problem, because in a way, what side is there is, for me, these are the two sides. Ongoing conflict, solution. And like, I would, if there were a side labelled solution, then I would be on that side.
So Palestinian solidarity is a pretty basic thing that most lefties have, right? And Russell Brand used to be a massive advocate for this and for BDS itself. But now in 2021, this is when the clip was filmed, both sides, who can say who's right? We need to come together just to stop the violence. But who can say what's wrong? Who can say what's wrong? If you watch my whole video on it, you could see how he was so outspoken on this issue back in 2014. But now, I don't want to upset my new fans, who might all be big Israeli supporters, especially if they're American conservatives. So I'll just act like, who can say? I know people across the political spectrum, and because Britain had a role in creating this problem in the first place, and it's part of colonialism worldwide, I can't say anything. Great cop-out, Russell. Now, something, even though if you didn't agree Russell Brand, he used to actually cover a lot of interesting things on his channel, but now, like I said, he's buying into the right-wing framing of everything, and he covered the Canadian Freedom Convoy. And he actually framed it in this way, and he framed it in a way that right-wingers would love.
The Canadian Freedom Truckers have kept on trucking for freedom. Why does the legacy media want to convey them so negatively and smear them? Now, this Canadian Freedom Convoy, people don't like talking about it, do they? And they also like misrepresenting it. Even I talked about it. I've done a video this week. If you watched it, I'll throw to it at the end, you know. And when it was talked about on Twitter, people just took the YouTube short and used that and right wing. So for the record, obviously, if this trucker convoy were to descend into violence, antipathy, hatred and loathing, I wouldn't support that. But what I do agree with is the right of people in a democracy to have a voice, the right of people to protest, to have an opinion, to communicate. Isn't it time to accept that some people want their voice to be democratically heard and are willing to protest in order to get it? People want to be included in the running and governance of their country. They want the right to be free. These are what would be called human rights, resourced from religious and spiritual traditions, but also deeply felt by all of us, wherever we're from, however we identify. We have more in common than we have that separates us, and certainly more than we have to oppose each other around.
So this protest movement of Canadian truckers was by a very small minority of them, astroturfed by the right wing in both America and Canada. And the way he frames it as like working class people just speaking up for their rights, and if it did have this bigotry, then he wouldn't support it because he doesn't support it. He's just carrying water for this protest movement, which was like astroturfed by these far-right groups as well, because he's trying to pander to the Jimmy Dore, Joe Rogan crowd, and maybe even the Bill Maher crowd, because of course the main thing for the freedom truckers, as they were calling themselves, was a freedom to not take the vaccine, which is something all these guys have advocated for. And they're really capitalizing on the right wing in places like Canada and America mainstreaming this anti-medical science rhetoric as part of like a fundamental political position they are now holding. So you get a lot of fans from that, and also some more libertarian types. But then Russell Brand, despite doing this for ages, promoting all these conspiracy theories, really playing into right-wing media and using a lot of right-wing sources, was actually quite insulted that people were calling him right-wing.
How am I right-wing? How can people say that? Now, I know loads of you watching this are right-wing. I imagine some of you are left-wing. I imagine many of you are so disenfranchised with modern politics, the modern media, the relationships between media, big business and government, the ineffectualness of democracy, the lies that are continually told in the media, that you no longer identify with any particular political party. And if it were true that a person that was once left-wing has become more sympathetic to conservative narratives, well, if that were true of me, and actually I don't actually think it is, because I think I'm way to the left of any government party anywhere in the world, actually, because I believe in spirituality and solutions that are entirely different and new models that are not contained within those institutions. But if there is a trend towards the popularity of right-wing media, my God, it's a broad one.
So Russell getting like very defensive there, and I do love the fact that he acknowledges that most of his audience are actually right-wing now. So I don't personally believe that Russell Brand is actually a conservative in the traditional sense of the word. And I don't believe that like he would support a lot of American conservative policies. But what I do believe Russell Brand is two things. Is he's heavily pandering to conservatives or weird like libertarian types that you see, like I said before, in the fan bases of people like Jimmy Dore or Joe Rogan, because that's what is either profitable or popular. And I'm willing to give Russell the benefit of the doubt that he's not completely doing this for money. Therefore, what is the other alternative? He is doing it to be popular on YouTube. That's why you talk about ridiculous stuff like he does. That's why you talk about like AstroTurf right-wing movements like there's something good for freedom, because you're playing into this narrative. This is why you're talking about Hunter Biden. Like Russell Brand, 2014 Russell Brand does not care about these things. Seriously, he doesn't, because he was more interested than that. So when he talks about so many issues and really takes on the right-wing framing of these issues, you can see why so many conservatives would love someone like him who actually is not conservative, because he also gives credence to the fact that a lot of people think, well, the left have gone crazy, and if Russell Brand is calling stuff out on the left, that means they are crazy, because Russell Brand used to be the token lefty in Hollywood. He's clearly just doing it for fame. The show is way more well produced now. It feels way more scripted. It's way more organized than it used to be, and I feel like it's way more insincere. And I feel generally that Russell Brand takes an enlightened centrist position, not because he necessarily is an enlightened centrist, it's because he doesn't want to annoy his new fans. So that is what I would call ego grifting. But now let's move on to Bill Maher, who I don't think is grifting. I just think has conservative views, but is basically like Joe Rogan a bit as well. Old man yells at cloud, or it's the children who are wrong, you know, those Simpsons memes. That is essentially what Bill Maher is. He thinks the left have left him behind because they've gone woke. They haven't. He's just always been pretty conservative. But like Ricky Gervais, he's got the reputation for being anti-conservative because he was an atheist who would say things against the Christian church. He also hated George Bush and always called out George Bush for what he was doing with his government. But then from like 2014 onwards, when he started allying himself more with like New Atheism's version of events about like refugees and Islam and things like that, it's pretty clear this guy was more right-wing. And I think it's very clear today that he is right-wing. So I just want to play you a clip from the video that I used, The Downfall of Bill Maher, which I made like 3 or so weeks ago, where he says that I haven't changed, the left have left me behind.
Let's get this straight. It's not me who's changed. It's the left, who is now made up of a small contingent who've gone mental and a large contingent who refuse to call them out for it. But I will. That's why I'm a hero at Fox these days. I used to make fun of the left as much. Yeah, because they didn't give me so much to work with. Members of Congress tweeting things like cancel rent, cancel mortgage, and no more policing or incarceration, declaring that capitalism is slavery, canceling Lincoln and Dr. Seuss, teaching children they're oppressors and math is racist, making Mr. Potato Head gender neutral, and now an emoji for pregnant men.
So again, just screams like old man yells at cloud. Someone who just feels like they've been left behind because they are so stubborn, they won't accept new things. And yeah, maybe you can be left behind in your beliefs. I don't think it's something to be proud of. Like, I will not accept any new progress, past 2004. Therefore, anyone else who's more progressive than me have gone crazy, because essentially I am the moderate. I am the guy who is rational. I make all the sense. So anyone who doesn't like capitalism is crazy. Anyone who doesn't want rent anymore is crazy. Bill Maher's net worth is something like 140 million. And I think that's something to discuss with him and Joe Rogan, in that, unlike Russell Brand, who is a very wealthy man as well, these guys are like crazily wealthy, and they have like net worths in the hundreds of millions rather than Russell Brand in the tens of millions. And I find it so laughable that Bill Maher would even come out with this because of his segments recently on LGBT rights and just generally like loads of stuff. Like, nothing I see on his channel really is ever doing scathing criticisms of conservatism anymore. So I use this clip as well, but I want to just play this before we go on to a bigger one that I didn't use, about him talking about why so many people identify as LGBT now. So here he is talking about the Don't Say Gay bill. I'm going to talk about Joe Rogan's opinion on this as well. This is why the right love him. Pass some horrible bill in Florida, get Joe Rogan and Bill Maher, these token liberals, to defend it, and then you get loads of conservative fans.
Truth in that maybe kids that young shouldn't be thinking about sex at all. I don't think it's specific. I think don't say, it's not like you're not allowed to literally not say gay, but they just don't want teachers talking about it. They think it's the province of parents. I don't know what is going on with the gender as much. Let me read what part of the bill. It says, the measure would, this is from CNN, would require districts to adopt procedures for notifying a student's parent if there is a change in the student's services or monitoring related to the student's mental, emotional, physical health or well-being. Okay, then it says something LGBTQ advocates argue could lead to some students being outed to their parents. That phrase struck me as odd. Like, outed to parents? Like, shouldn't parents know everything anyway? It's like, we need to protect the student from the parents with the school.
So again, this guy is such a boomer liberal that he does not understand why you wouldn't want to be outed in your gender identity or sexuality to your parents. Why you might be comfortable around your peers, people who are similar age to you, who probably know you better as well, your friends, and you're growing up with them. They might accept you this way. Your parents, who might be like Bill Maher or other like conservative types, might not accept you or treat you the same. Therefore, you do not want to tell them. So passing a law where teachers and schools have to tell parents if they find out, that's why it's bad. But boomer Bill Maher cannot comprehend these things. But when he carries water for things like Don't Say Gay in Florida, that is why conservatives love him and say like, oh, he is the rational liberal and the leftists are the crazy ones. Not that Bill Maher pretty much is a conservative in most respects. Now, there was another clip that's more recent where he's talking about why so many people are now identifying as either, lesbian, gay, or transgender. And he acknowledges that while, people may be doing that because they're more comfortable now in a more tolerant society, maybe some people are just doing it to seem cool, I guess.
Yes. Part of the rise in LGBT numbers is from people feeling free enough to tell it to a pollster, and that's all to the good. But some of it is, it's trendy. Penis equals man? Okay, boomer. Remember, the prime directive of every teen is anything to shock and challenge the squares who brought you up. It's why nobody gets a nose ring at 56. And if you haven't noticed that with kids, doing something for the likes is more important than their own genitals, you haven't been paying attention. Dr. Erica Anderson is a prominent 71-year-old clinical psychologist who is herself transgender and who now says, I think it's gone too far. The LA Times summarizes, she's come to believe that some children identifying as trans are falling under the influence of their peers and social media. If you attend a small dinner party of typically very liberal, upper-income Angelenos, it is not uncommon to hear parents who each have a trans kid having a conversation about that. What are the odds of that happening in Youngstown, Ohio? If this spike in trans children is all natural, why is it regional? Either Ohio is shaming them or California is creating them.
So how ridiculous is that on multiple levels? I guess I'll start with the end, in that he can't understand why people in California may be more comfortable in coming out as anything rather than Ohio. You seriously don't understand that? Like, California, which has a good reputation for being very liberal, progressive in many ways, having more tolerance for these things, having better access to like trans healthcare. You don't understand why there might be more out people in California compared to Ohio, compared to any red state, which is literally criminalizing this stuff, which is making it very, very hard to even transition and is passing all these laws against the LGBT community. You think that people in California are more likely to come out of something because they've been brainwashed or influenced by social media compared to Florida. That would mean you have to accept that both states have similar laws about these things when they don't. It's literally so easy. There isn't more gay, lesbian, or transgender people in one country or another. There is only more people who feel comfortable in coming out. There are plenty of these people in countries across the world which have laws criminalizing this stuff. That's why they can't come out. If Saudi Arabia got a new progressive government and then suddenly you see the rates of people coming out as gay and trans skyrocket, it's not because they've been indoctrinated by woke ideology. It's literally because their oppressive government that would kill them for these things is gone. So that's why they come out. It's really, really not hard. And the social media thing is just like such boomer energy. Like, kids want to do it to be trendy. Why would you want to do that to be trendy? Why would you want to identify with these groups who are under attack right now to be trendy for social media likes? Why would you want that? What, you want the threats of violence to be bigger against you? You want your safety to be worse because you want to seem cool or edgy? I'm sure some people in the comments will be like, well, I knew this person, blah, 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 blah. But let's be honest, this is not an issue. And taking one transgender doctor who said it's gone too far and being like, well, if she said it, then it's true. Caitlyn Jenner is transgender. Remember her campaign for governor? All the stuff she said about transgender people in sports? Look at people like Blair White as well. People who ally themselves with conservatives despite being part of a group they hate. This is nothing new. You just wheeling out one doctor and saying, well, if this trans doctor thinks it, then it must be true. And talking about like dinner parties where everyone has a trans kid, open trans people is still such a minority. You probably aren't going to many dinner parties, even in California, where every parent has a trans kid. Again, boomer, probably underlined by actual bigotry as well. Like, he doesn't actually like this stuff. And again, is this meant to be funny? Is this comedy? It just seems like an old guy having a rant against the LGBT community and progressivism. Doesn't seem like a guy who is actually trying to make any funny jokes. Reminds me of the Ricky Gervais video yesterday. But then you can see why people like Bill Maher, right? This is stuff that Republicans have always saying, and the same with Russell Brand to a lesser extent, is they play into the right-wing framing of issues. So with the Don't Say Gay bill, with more people identifying as part of the LGBT community, it's about like woke ideology and leave it to the parents, and children are just doing it for likes. Bill Maher, to me personally, seems way more just like a conservative. And the only redeeming things he has going for him in liberal circles is that because he used to be an atheist, he used to criticize the power of Christianity in American politics, and he used to hate George Bush. That is basically it. Anything else he said over the last 15 years pretty much aligns itself with centrism, and a lot of times like this with conservatism. So even though he doesn't like Donald Trump, I couldn't even really point to many things that conservatives necessarily would hate about Bill Maher, unlike Russell Brand, who I know does have more left-wing politics. And I know you probably say to a conservative who likes him, like, what do you think of this? And they absolutely hate it. Bill Maher, not so much. So let's move on, lastly, to who we covered last Friday. The last person in this trio, Joe Rogan. Now, Joe Rogan has cultivated like a fan base kind of across the political spectrum because he's platformed multiple people from across the political spectrum. And he actually did used to be more progressive. Now, I'm going to play the whole clip, but on Friday, we played you this clip. It was a montage of him saying progressive things.
I've never voted right-wing in my life. I consider universal basic income a really good idea. I want free college education. Take it easy. Hello, Bernie.
How are you, Joe?
Wonderful. Pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I like Tulsi and I like Bernie. I think I'll probably vote for Bernie. I think he's looking out for the interests of the working people. And I think he wants people to have a better life and do better. And I'm all for that. I'm very women's rights, civil rights, gay rights, trans rights. I'm even universal health care.
So in that clip, him saying he'd vote for Bernie Sanders, he's for UBI, everything like that. Like, seems like a guy who even might be more centrist, does have left-leaning politics. But over the last 2 years, he has gained an absolutely massive conservative fan base primarily. And like we covered in last week's video, a lot of his more left-leaning fan base has completely given up on him. So keep in mind, Joe Rogan is insanely wealthy, right? So just to play you a little segment, he came out against UBI in a video like last week saying basically it makes people lazy. Like $1,000 a month makes you want to quit your job and sit at home and play video games.
Oh, universal
basic income.
I just think that was a good idea before the pandemic. During the pandemic, when everybody's getting the money from the government, people didn't want to work, and it was like, And I was like, oh, this is not good.
Yeah.
This is not smart. You got to give people some incentive to do things. There's a certain amount of entitlement that people have today that they just did not have before, where they feel like the government owes them something, regardless of how little or how much they've put into the system. They feel like the government owes them something.
So why his audience are turning on him? It's not only that he's going against things like that. Recently, in a Lex Fridman podcast he did, he also came out against basically mental health days for work. And, you know, in this new progressive age, we are now finally treating mental health like we do with physical health, because those two things are so interconnected. As someone who's experienced very real physical symptoms of mental health problems, I can tell you that things like mental health days would be nice to take when I used to do full-time work. So here is him and Lex talking about it, because a recent Project Veritas, you know, very, very reputable organization, astroturfed by the far right in America, interviewed some people, I think at Twitter, who were talking about mental health days.
Well, have you seen some of those Project Veritas videos of the people that work at Twitter that were secretly filmed discussing what it's like there?
Yeah, I mean, obviously
Yeah.
Yes, I know, but
But what you just did is, that's the problem I have with all of it.
Well, with all of it on all sides, though.
Yeah, but I mean, with all of it, like these people being interviewed, like without their knowledge.
Yeah.
They think they're on dates.
Right.
You know?
Well, that's
they're
okay.
drinking, stupid shit gets said.
Yeah.
And then, you know, he confronts them at a restaurant.
I think that's unfair, and it's clickbait and so on. But it's also representative of a culture.
And it's also an expose of a culture that has immense power. And so if you can get these rare windows into how it actually functions, that might be the only way to do it, is to get these people in these intimate moments where they're candid, where they don't know that they're being recorded. And they say things, and you get an understanding of the fact that you could just take time off whenever you don't feel well mentally. You could take a week off, you could take a month off, no one cares. And that the entire operation is essentially they think that they're communists, and that they think that, you know, capitalism is inherently bad, and that these are the people that are running the discourse of the biggest social media site in terms of the ability to disseminate information the world's ever known.
Again, just like Bill Maher, total boomer. Do you honestly think, even if there were like out communists in those interviews with people, that Twitter is run by communists? And this is such a boomer mentality that Silicon Valley and the companies that spawned from it are all just like extremely progressive. Not that they're run by people who simp for Ayn Rand and are these massive capitalist libertarians. If someone needs a month off for mental health, I do support that, because most people, first of all, aren't going to take a month off for their mental health. People who really need it, they need it. And I guarantee if you offer that to a company, not everyone will be off like every single month. There won't be a person off taking it for their mental health. It will just be the people who need it. I think people like Joe Rogan, just because they're so divorced from what working people are really like, is they think people will take any opportunity to be extremely lazy. So if they think this policy is real, just like many capitalist conservatives, entitlement, laziness, you saw it with the UBI clip, this guy is so wealthy, never has to worry about these problems. If he wants a mental health day, he can take the rest of his life off if he wants, because he's so financially secure. For most people, I don't know about you guys, at my old job, I'd take holiday, and I had minimum holiday, I'd take holiday to go see a doctor. If I wanted a mental health day, or a sick day at all, I'd have to take holiday. I would have loved some mental health days. I would have loved some sick days that maybe played into that, so I could recharge. Sometimes you just get burnt out. And if you have terrible bosses as well, then you just absolutely hate your life. Again, out of touch boomer, but playing very heavily into the capitalist conservative mindset that Silicon Valley is run by a bunch of communists who all just want to sit around doing nothing on their mental health days. You can see why conservatives like this guy so much. So getting into the LGBT stuff as well, Joe Rogan has also played into the framing of the Don't Say Gay bill and talking about groomers.
A 7-year-old kid. I mean, I feel like that is the job of the parents.
Yeah.
That's the job. I mean,
and you hope the parents are doing
right.
it, but
when kids get older, apology of a young person who's trying to figure out who they are in the world is. But the idea that this is don't say gay, right, because you're saying that ages first grade to third grade, that you shouldn't be bringing up these subjects to them. I mean, I think a lot of people are saying, no, I just don't want you grooming my kids.
So I love this belief that children don't get taught about relationships in school, like heterosexual relationships, because they do. And the belief that telling them that some people are in gay relationships, for example, is grooming them? What if a fellow student has 2 gay parents? Just never allowed to speak about that? If someone asks you a question, just totally ignore it because you're in total fear of a right-wing mob coming after you. But people like Joe Rogan will just listen to the last person they spoke to and they'll get this right-wing framing and play into it, and then they'll talk about these issues like they are an actual conservative as well. And like I said, can see why conservatives like these people when they carry water for horrible bills like Don't Say Gay. So Joe Rogan, in my opinion, was someone who was fairly left-leaning and maybe had some conservative views, but the pandemic firmly rotted his brain. Like I said in my video last Friday, it changed his opinion on a lot of things, made him think about like, oh, my freedom from X, Y, and Z. I don't like people staying at home or quitting their jobs because they have to serve me at my favorite restaurant or something like that. And that's why it seems like he's come out so much against like just employee mental health things or UBI to help your average person get through this hellscape we call living in a capitalist society. And he's so divorced on that because he's always been quite successful and famous, and now he is insanely rich, just like Bill Maher. And again, these guys are meant to be comedians, or maybe even be a bit edgy. They literally just have the most boomer conservative viewpoints of all. So that is it for showing you what these 3 are like. And now just to conclude this all, basically, for multiple different reasons, these 3 have become new conservative heroes. And the only through line I will say about them is that they all buy into the conservative framing of issues. But I would say Russell Brand, like I said at the start, is the outlier in this video because I just believe he is grifting and pandering to the right-wing framing so he gets more viewers and gets maybe more ad revenue. But by and large, I do not actually believe Russell Brand is your typical conservative, whereas Bill Maher and Joe Rogan are, in my opinion, right-wingers, and they like this right-wing ideology, and they are these pro-capitalists who do not understand why progressives don't like capitalism, or we want like workplace reform. We just want more like people to have better lives, and because they're insanely rich, they think it's all ridiculous. Bill Maher particularly is more of a zealot against LGBT stuff because he's just this old man yells at cloud, cannot understand why people might feel safer to come out as part of his community, where Joe Rogan is primarily focused on the transgender thing, like things in sport, maybe having to say someone's legit pronouns or something like that, and maybe they see it as an attack on their freedom of speech. But all of these things play into like the conservative ideology, and what these guys are all seen as left-wing people who are finally sick of wokeism, and they're pushing back against wokeism because even though they're liberals and left-leaning, this is too much, it's too radical, we cannot accept this. And conservatives are like, well, there are the same liberals right there, I like these guys, they're speaking truth to those crazy lefties who now run the Democratic Party under Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi. There's more sinister usage of these people where like conservative media prop these guys up as new like anti-woke figures, and you saw that in the subreddit because every article that was linked there was like The Blaze or something similar. But again, just shows how these people have either fallen into right-wing politics or they are grifting towards a right-wing audience for their own ego and, I guess, internet fame. But anyway, that is it for the video. Hopefully now you understand why conservatives love these guys. Let me know down in the comments what you think. Follow me on social media at the Kavernacle on Twitter, on Instagram. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.